Hi there, folks. Jim Grasser, 303 Barbecue. It is pork shoulder day. I'm going to prep a pork butt. Butt and shoulder kind of are the same thing. It's actually not the butt, it's the shoulder. Whenever I buy a pork shoulder, I always get the bone in. I think it tends to cook a little bit more evenly. That bone, something about the marrow maybe, something in there gives it some good flavoring. Yeah. A couple things about pork shoulder. Very fatty piece of meat. I'm not as big a fan of pork fat as I am of like beef fat. If I were cooking a brisket, I don't trim it at all. With pork, I do trim. I'll get rid of all that fat. When you go to pull it, it's just not a very tender bite. It doesn't break down like beef fat. This is a thing that some people do, some people don't do. I prefer to take it off. You may want to try it both ways, but I like to have it off. So, that being said, I'm going to get right into this thing and just slice just underneath the fat. Try to be as careful as possible. If you get too deep, you'll start getting into the muscle, and I want to keep as much of that as possible. And that would be my daughter. She insisted on being in here, but she wasn't going to talk. Let's see. That's what I'm going to do. There's quite a bit of fat on there, and again, I think some people. It's a barbecuer's choice, really, whether or not you leave this on or get it off. I just don't like the flavor of it. I find it difficult to pull the meat. If you're pulling the meat and you've got it in there, you kind of have to go through and pick it out. If you miss it and somebody grabs a bite of that and tries to chew through it, it's just not a good flavor. It's not tender, it's just yuck. So, I get rid of that. Pork shoulder, by the way, is one of the most forgiving cuts of meat that you can do. So if you're just getting into smoking food, I suggest trying pork shoulder to begin. It's hard to goof up. We're going to put this into the smoker at 180 degrees for 16 hours. After that 16 hours, I'm going to crank up the heat in the smoker to about 225. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to get the internal temperature of this piece of meat up to somewhere around 190, 195, somewhere around there. She's trying to whisper. Okay. Something you'll notice, there are kind of two different separate muscles, and in between this muscle there is a layer of fat. I like to get in there and do that as well. Get that out. And it's almost going to make the piece of meat split into two, and that's all right. Peyton, no talking. Sit down, baby doll. Okay. So, just about done trimming here. And now you'll see what I'm talking about with the two muscles. It's almost like they're two separate muscles now. get all that fat out of the inside of there, and it almost breaks them into two different muscles. I'm just going to get this little slab of fat here. I'm liking it. Okay, so this goes into the trash. And now we're ready for spice rub. I've got my 303 rub here. Brown sugar based rub. I would recommend some sort of Kansas City style rub, something like that, where you have brown sugar, a little bit of sweet, a little bit of heat. We did a rub a while back. I used some cayenne. That'll kind of kick up the heat a little bit. But what you're looking for with pork is while it smokes, you want to get a good layer of bark on it. It's going to look burned when it's done cooking. All that really is all of this brown sugar caramelizing. They call it rub with a pork shoulder. I kind of jokingly say give it a massage. Actually rub it into there. And don't be afraid of not using enough. Use a lot of rub. Get that bark nice and crispy on the outside. It'll really offset the smooth texture, the very tender bites of pork with the occasional crunchy bite from that bark. Get it on all the sides. We'll get it inside that area that I was talking about. I want to get the edges too. Every bit of meat gets covered. I'm liking it. Okay. There is our pork shoulder. The bone, as you can see right there. Let's go back a bit. Okay, so 16 hours in the smoker at 180 degrees. Crank it up to 225 for the final 2 hours-ish. We're looking for an internal temperature of about 190, 195 degrees. Once you've hit that, you're good to go. I pull it off, let it rest for a good 20 or 30 minutes, and then start pulling away and enjoy your pork.